conversation that we want to have, a continuing conversation, I might add, that many of us who have been working with people who are in difficult and desperate situations and are needing shelter for their life so that they can get to some sense of permanence and stability. And so it's our honor to host this. Let me just share with you that you're probably here for the same reason that I'm here, and that's because we care. We care about our fellow humans. And if you're like me also, you can think of people who you know are in a situation where they are without permanent shelter or that you have encountered, and you long to find some solutions and you long to help in some practical way. And our church has been on a little bit of an adventure in this regard when we restarted what was formerly Wiggins United Methodist Church almost 4 years ago, and we found ourselves kind of being the go-to church for people in homeless situations because of our location, because of our proximity. And so we have found ourselves just commonly encountering people who come to our doors. 40 to 80 people come through our doors every week, and many of those people are in desperate situations, either facing homelessness as a possibility or living in a situation. And so we have just found ourselves wanting to be part of the solution and not just smile and wishing people well, but to really get engaged in people's lives. And I would be remiss if, as we gather together, I wouldn't honor my good friend Glenn Miller, who has been working really hard with people for the last 7-8 years in partnership with all kinds of people like the Veterans Veterans Administration and others, and with Seven Hills, with Salvation Army, as we unite together to do something wonderful. Great things happen when nobody cares who gets the credit, but when we all come together and say we want to be a part of the solution. So it's our honor to host you. Janice has been here, my assistant, has really done a lot of the work, the heavy lifting to get things ready. And so we're just glad that you're here. Feel at home. I hope that you have. All the supplies or the snacks have been provided for us. They're welcome in our sanctuary. This is not the grandmother's house who has the white carpet and doesn't want you to stain it. So you're just welcome to be and move about freely as we get together. It's my pleasure now to introduce Joyce Hale, the president of the League of Women Voters, and she is going to get us kick-started.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the Genesis Church for allowing us to have the facility to bring this issue to you. We feel like that there are many times within the community where there are a lot of projects going on that you as the general public may not realize is of interest to the League. We take on a lot of public policy issues. Of course, we're primarily interested in voting and making sure that everyone has a voice, but we also take on a lot of environmental and social policy kinds of things. So if you're looking to have a champion for a project that you are interested in promoting, check to see if maybe the League is already working in that area, and we would love to collaborate with you. The League is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We are very close to celebrating our 100th anniversary in 2020. And this is important on several levels. We are now at a stage where a lot of people are becoming civically engaged for the first time in a while. And I think that as soon as they look about, they will see that there are those organizations which are rather newcomers to trying to make change or to bring better communities. And then there are others like the League that have been there championing causes for many, many years. And so we have not only history and a legacy that we're looking to keep in place and honor, but we are wanting more and more people to join us. And so anyone, men and women, we are not selective to women any longer. Men and women are invited to join and be part of the League of Women Voters, and we hope that maybe this will be your first time to realize that we can do something together. It is with my pleasure to introduce the first Vice President of the League of Women Voters, Laura Kellum, who will now get the program going.
Thank you, Joyce, and thanks to all of you for being here tonight. I'm Laura Kellums, and not only am I on the league board, but I also serve as the regional director of an organization called Arkansas Advocates for Children and Families. And so this subject matter tonight is close to my heart and close to the work that I do on a daily basis. But I'm really here because I'm filling in for the person who was supposed to be moderator, my husband Kyle, who is ill today. So I'm sorry that he couldn't, and he is sorry, very sorry, that he couldn't be here tonight to enjoy this panel and to be here with all of you. So his regrets I bring to you, but I am glad to get to be here. And we have several people in the room who helped really organize this. I'm not sure if Sarah Geen is here, a member of the league board. She's on her way, I think, from Springdale. Angela Denovi, of course, you met Joyce, another league member who couldn't be here tonight, Beth Barham, really helped put this together. So thank you to her. Anybody else am I forgetting? And Martha Ward. Thank you so much for your help with this program tonight, and thanks to all of you for sharing your precious time on a Thursday night to talk about a really important issue. And the folks we really want to hear from are here, the experts that we brought here tonight. Dr. Kevin Fitzpatrick being the first one that I want to introduce. I just wanted to acknowledge how much work he put into this panel and helping league members organize it. He really spearheaded it with his expertise and reached out to the folks he knows very well in this community to make sure we had a very expert panel tonight. So I'll go ahead and introduce them. Dr. Kevin Fitzpatrick is here directly to my left and on your right. He's a university professor and the Bernice Jones Endowed Chair in Community in the Department of Sociology at the University of Arkansas. Kevin directs the Community and Family Institute, and he's been actively involved in homelessness research and advocacy for more than 3 decades, first in Birmingham, Alabama for 20 years, and then the past 13 years here in Fayetteville. When he arrived in 2005, there was no point-in-time census and no comprehensive data on the homeless population in Northwest Arkansas. He designed and implemented the first point-in-time census in 2007 and has organized more every year throughout the has organized 5 more throughout the decade. In addition to these counts, he has collected comprehensive data on homeless adults living in Benton and Washington counties through intensive interviews with more than 400 people. Along with a number of published books and peer-reviewed articles on homelessness and housing, Kevin has been a homelessness advocate in our community, serving on boards of several important organizations in our community, including the Northwest Arkansas Continuum of Care, Habitat for Humanity, Seven Hills Homeless Center, Salvation Army, the Cobblestone Project, and most recently, Serve NWA. It is his work with Serve NWA and the development of the New Beginnings community that he will be talking with us about tonight. And next to Dr. Fitzpatrick is Solomon Birchfield. He serves as the operations director at Seven Hills Homeless Center. He grew up here in South Fayetteville and joined Seven Hills in 2014 after moving back to the area. His role at Seven Hills allows him to work alongside people who experience homelessness on a daily basis, and also to see people regain housing stability by using the supports of housing programs. It has taught him to see people's resourcefulness in solving their own problems, caused him to become an advocate for evidence-based housing programs, and provoked an interest in the larger systems changes necessary to end homelessness in America. So thank you for being here, Solomon. And thirdly, we have Joshua Robinette. He grew up in West Texas in a single-parent family. Due to his father's addictions and lack of support, Joshua and his 2 younger siblings grew up in poverty. It was because of this that Joshua and his family would encounter the support and ministry of the Salvation Army. There, they found much more than financial support. For Joshua, it was the beginning of a lifelong calling to serve as a Salvation Army officer. Today, Joshua has been blessed to be married to his wife, Ashley, and to be a dad to 4 beautiful kids. They live in Fayetteville and serve as the area commanders of the Northwest Arkansas Salvation Army. As area commanders, they oversee 2 emergency shelters, a drug and alcohol rehabilitation center, and a vast array of social services. So welcome, thank you for being here. And last but not least, we have Joy Shirley, who began serving Fayetteville Public Schools in July 2014. She received her bachelor's degree in elementary education and master's degree in special education from the University of Arkansas, Fayetteville, and she earned her specialist degree from Harding University in Searcy. She's served in education for 23 years. She began her career as an alternative education high school teacher. She also served as a 5th grade teacher, English for speakers of other languages teacher, literacy specialist, special education teacher, and elementary school administrator. In her current role at Fayetteville as Director of Student Services, she has the honor to work alongside counselors and social workers to support and empower students and families. She serves on the Arkansas Mental Health and Education Association Board and the Northwest Arkansas Continuum of Care Board, as she welcomes continuing dialogue to promote student success with other decision makers affecting education. Joy and her husband Vince have 2 children and enjoy their family time on their farm. So please join me in welcoming this distinguished panel.
Thank you, Laura. Appreciate you being here. Jody, thank you for hosting this, and to the League for bringing what we all know to be an important issue in our city and in our region. I wanted to just briefly talk for a few minutes about a project that I've been working on for the last several years. I have a slide to give you some context just for the brief moment that I want to talk about where we are now and what that slide represents. That slide represents a history of information that we've been gathering to pinpoint exactly where the problems are, where the gaps are in terms of this particular population. I'm not going to go through the slide, but you can see that there appears to be a linear trend. There are lots of arrows going up, nothing going down. And of course that continues to be the case here in Northwest Arkansas with regards to the homeless population. And there are a couple of things that struck us as we worked with this information over a period of time, that there were some things that were not changing. And one of the things that it was clear to us that was not changing was the number of beds that could support an emergency relief for a population that was growing. Now, what I have up here are just a couple of minor statistics that again drive home this point that there appears to be a gap in service. So what we saw over the last 10 years was an unsheltered population in Northwest Arkansas continuing to increase, but no emergency beds, no immediate relief for them. That number of beds remain constant. In the last 10 years, you can see that population more than doubled, primarily in Washington County, primarily in Fayetteville. But we also know that unsheltered population continues to grow in other sections of the region as well. Now, the majority of that population, again, as I said, is focused on and is in Washington County and Fayetteville. This picture I took just a few months ago, and I mean, it is clear and present what the living conditions are right now for a rather large group of people. And again, over a period of 10 years, it was clear that there was a lot of effort that was going on in Northwest Arkansas, the work of the Salvation Army and Seven Hills and other organizations that were clearly addressing need. There were more transitional beds that were being brought online. There were more permanent supportive housing opportunities that were being offered that were brought online. Lots of things were taking place in a variety of ways, but one thing that we were not addressing was the unsheltered population. And again, I think that many would agree that this is a pretty common sight, not only in Fayetteville, but in some other cities as well. So that brings us to this real quick, because we only have 10 minutes. So, and Solomon already accused me of talking too much. But so one of the things that we knew that needed to happen is that we needed to figure out a way to bring more beds online, more shelter online. You know, I know Josh is going to talk about the Salvation Army, but if it was not for the Salvation Army, there would be literally no emergency shelter beds in the county, in Washington County. Now that to me is extraordinarily scary, because with a population that you saw that's growing at the rate that it's growing, that's a really critical need. People enter into homelessness, they have an immediate need. That immediate need oftentimes can be met in a relatively short period of time, and they can be moved into a more stable environment. What we now know is that oftentimes some people get into a cycle, and that cycle is very difficult to break. But you know, if it was not for the Army, there would be actually no support at all. So what we had recognized is that we ought to try and figure out a way to take some of that burden off of them, to take some of that pressure off of them, and figure out a way that we could add to the community need. Clearly the gap was there, and thus New Beginnings started as a project. And the goal of this is that, you know, people get caught up in what exactly it is or what exactly it looks like, but the goal is essentially to provide 20 beds that don't currently exist in Northwest Arkansas. And the idea, and I'm going to run through these architect renderings, which are fantastic. We're working with the Community Design Center here at the University of Arkansas, and they have done a fantastic job, pro bono I might add, and have really moved the project forward, helped us move the project through the Planning Commission, and we now have a 5-year conditional use permit to begin work on a site here in South Fayetteville. There we go. And that was the site right there. That intersection, that big green open field is at the intersection of South School and 19th. Right across the 19th, right across the street from 19th is where Seven Hills is currently at. The 5-acre piece of property you can see is not only that open field, but those woods in the back, and the plan as it currently stands, and really can't see that very well. But you can see the outline of the community, and there are, you know, a whole bunch of additional issues that are in that drawing. But here's a little above the sort of a bird's eye view. There's a community space right here, office space. Shelter is, the area is covered with a community kitchen on one end, and on the other end are toilets and showers. These units in here are about 150 square feet, and each one of those units has a heating and air unit in it. It does not have running water in it, but it does have heat and air and electricity, and you know, the current design right now is for 20 units to be on that property, and we thought we needed to start small. I remember a good friend of mine always told me that you needed to start small before you went too big, and nice to see him here in the audience with me. But you know, again, the goal was to essentially pilot this project. We know that it works in cities all across America. We don't know if it's going to work in Fayetteville, but we do believe that with the right amount of planning on the front end, this certainly has the potential to impact the population that right now is currently being unserved. And here's just another picture, and there's kind of the picture of the rendering of the inside. I think my time is up, okay. The thing that I wanted to just leave you with, and sort of the takeaway is that, again, the importance of understanding how it is that we use data, and then what we can take away from that. And you know, I mean, for me to be able to step out of my role as a university professor and a quantitative sociologist to getting more boots on the ground and working with a nonprofit to bring this to fruition has been a challenge. But I think that, you know, we've been blessed with a couple of private donors that have advanced this in ways that we would not have been able to do. We've not been asking for public money. We do not at this point want to do that. But I think that at its current plan and in the way that we have it set up, I think that we can actually have an impact on that part of the community and in that part of the population. As you will hear tonight, this problem is extremely complicated, and we're only trying to address one piece of that complicated problem. And I think that my colleagues are here tonight to share not only with, and the reason why I invited them to this is not only to share about the complexity, but for people to actually hear what folks are doing. I think sometimes we get lost in all of the, you know, and I was committed not to presenting any data tonight because I think we get lost in all of that sometimes, but I really wanted to focus and have the focus of this panel so that you could hear what folks are actually doing and the kind of work that they're doing on a day-to-day basis with this population so that you could actually begin to understand how complicated that actually is. So thank you for that time, and let me introduce Solomon Birchfield.
Hey, good evening, everybody. It's great to see such a large turnout. I grew up on Morningside Drive here in South Fayetteville, so I've lived other places, and about 6 years ago moved back to this area. So I get to serve at Seven Hills now with my neighbors here in South Fayetteville. I want to take the chance to tell you a little bit about Seven Hills Homeless Center, what things we're doing in the community, and where we see the future going. So to understand Seven Hills, you need to know we have 3 programs. We operate a day center here on South School. We have an apartment complex that we operate on Huntsville, about 1.5 miles that direction. And then we have a veterans program as a pathway out of homelessness for veterans. So let me start at the day center and just ask the question, if you did not have your home to go back to tonight and wake up in tomorrow, how would you meet your basic needs? And so the things that, as you think about that, the things that someone who is experiencing homelessness needs to have access to meet their basic needs, that's what we designed the Seven Hills Day Center around. So we have breakfast every morning. About 60 or 75 people eat breakfast. We have showers. People can take a shower, they can shop in the clothing room to get a new pair of pants or a new shirt. They can go through the pantry and go shopping for food. At the day center at Seven Hills, there's an array of storage lockers. So imagine if you're sleeping in your car or staying outside, camping in the pictures that Kevin showed you. Where are you going to store your stuff that needs to stay safe, that can't get wet, that you don't want someone to steal? There's not enough storage lockers, but there's storage lockers at Seven Hills. There's a mail service, so about 250 people receive their mail at the day center address. So whether that's a letter from someone in jail or an address they can put down for a food stamp application or for a job application, they have an address because they received their mail at the day center. We don't have overnight shelter. We close the day center. It's open from 8 o'clock to 4 o'clock. And so a lot of the individuals that come and use services there, they may be staying at the Salvation Army, or they may be staying outside. So basic needs. How do you meet your basic needs? The Seven Hills Day Center is really focused on helping accomplish that. But it is more than that. We have 2 social workers at the day center. Deja has been there for 90 years, I think. She's worked at Seven Hills. And Glenn's applauding. She deserves it. Deja is an incredible woman and an inspiration. The kind of things that our social workers try to focus on with individuals that come through the day center is to meet some immediate needs. So it might be a crisis situation. Someone may be fleeing domestic violence. Help solve that immediate need, connect a person to a resource in the community that can help resolve their situation. It also might be a not an immediate need, but a more longer term need. So between Deja and Tanya both, they have probably helped dozens of people file and receive disability that couldn't fill out all that paperwork on their own. That's what the social worker is doing with them. We have had people show up at the day center who got out of jail at midnight and walked up the road without shoes and without a shirt and are, waiting at the door. So they're going to have immediate needs. We may have an individual that has a mental health condition that's not addressed, and they have been living outside for 8 years, 10 years. And their kind of needs are going to be different. So between our two social workers, we probably have between 250 and 300 case management sessions that happen every week. In addition to what our own staff can do or can help connect individuals to, there's also a huge community of partners that serve on site at Seven Hills. So rather than having someone have to get on a bus and go all around town to contact the 12 different people they need to contact or agencies, there are some critical services that we just host. So Ozark Guidance Center is at Seven Hills twice every week to help do assessments, and they do have a housing program for people that experience mental illness and can help get them in the PATH program. We have a group of attorneys that provide pro bono legal services that are there twice a week. We have a nursing class at the University of Arkansas that the entire class occurs on Wednesday and Thursday all day, just to help the students learn a lot and to help meet some of the physical health care needs of individuals at Seven Hills. The mobile dental clinic is there once a month or twice a month sometimes. So from all that important stuff all the way down to haircuts, or the Washington County SNAP benefit person also comes out. You name it, there's a huge number of partners that come on site to help meet people's needs right there without them having to travel somewhere or go somewhere else to make that happen. So that's what happens at the Seven Hills Day Center on a daily basis. About 500 people use services, unique people use services every month at Seven Hills. And if you zoom out and look at the whole year, it's about 2,100 people who are coming and accessing some service. So let me use that as a segue then to talk about not just people who are experiencing homelessness and how they can help meet their basic needs, but how can someone transition out of homelessness and regain housing stability. One of the crucial things that our social workers do, I think, is be often the referral out into the community for individuals experiencing homelessness, because we have incredible partners throughout Fayetteville and Northwest Arkansas. Housing programs run by the City of Fayetteville, the HEARTH program. The City of Fayetteville offers a transitional housing program and a permanent supportive housing program for people with disabilities. So that's a crucial referral connection to get people connected to an opportunity to regain housing. The Havenwood transitional program up in Bentonville is a great program, especially for single women or moms with kids. I'm seeing Angela's head nods, so it's both of those, moms. So that's someone may not know how to find that resource, and so they will just come to Seven Hills. And so then our social workers we often say we're the front door where a lot of people come in and then say hi, and we're going to talk with them and find out how to connect them to the resource in the community that can help them get where they're going. You're sitting in another key resource. The Genesis Church in Glenn specifically is a group of people and a person that meets people one-on-one, really tailored to let me get to know you and figure out how I can help you get where you're going. And so this church has become an incredible resource for individuals experiencing homelessness as well. So all those programs, and that kind of segues me into discussing briefly the two housing programs that Seven Hills offers. One is the apartment complex down the road. So we have a transitional component that is a 1 or 2 year program. Everyone who lives in those apartments begins as homeless. And they meet with a case manager every week. They set employment goals. They get connected to maybe mental health supports or to treatment supports for addiction issues. And they meet every week and find stability and then find success in reaching their goals. So that's a 1 or 2 year program, and it's open to anybody. It's not specific to just veterans or just women or anything like that. And then our last program is a veteran services program. So that is a community-based program that is not at one site, but it's kind of more like a voucher where you could go to an apartment complex anywhere around Fayetteville and rent and be able to live there and have the lease in your name, and then your case manager would come to you to help you work on the goals that you have for life. So the veteran issue specifically, it's great to give a shout out because the HUD-VASH program, I haven't seen anyone here tonight that is working with the VA, but the VA's HUD-VASH program is an incredible program that has provided housing for over 100 veterans who have long-term homelessness, have experienced long-term homelessness. And then the SSVF grant also operates here in Fayetteville and serves Washington County and Benton County actually to help veterans regain housing. And our veteran services program does something very similar to that. So I think in the past 6 months, about 30 veterans have been housed in that program. And nationally, this is something that America can be really proud of. Veteran homelessness has been cut in half from 2010 into 2018. And so as we consider what does the future look like, the programs that were funded through the VA that helped cut in half veterans homelessness, it's those kind of programs I think I'm most excited about anyway, to look to and say these are the programs that could help end homelessness for chronically homeless individuals with disabilities or for people that are trying to get their feet back. So I'll close just by saying that I think it's a really beautiful moment in Northwest Arkansas because while Kevin pointed out how homelessness has been a large and growing problem, there is also a growing awareness and a growing engagement. I think we have never seen so many service providers collaborating, working together to address homelessness. We've never seen more city leaders and leaders in the faith community and thought leaders and stakeholders of all types say that we have a part to play in this. So I'm really excited. I think it's a beautiful moment, and I hope that we're gonna, as we continue to work together, we're gonna see this statistics, see some lines going down, and see some people that aren't housed that get to move into stable housing. And that's it.
Well, my name is Josh Robinette, and my wife and I have the unique privilege of overseeing the work of the Salvation Army in Northwest Arkansas. We moved here in June of last year and have made a lot of progress, I think, as an organization. I'm very excited about. I'll share with you. But before I do, let me say this. I believe that there is no reason why anyone should be sleeping outside in America, let alone Northwest Arkansas, and that we can do better. And I think we are, as a community, coming together, or service providers coming together, and going to make an impact on some of those numbers Dr. Fitzpatrick shared. Homelessness is a complicated problem, and we hosted a tour earlier today at our shelter. And one of the things I said about homelessness and it being so complicated is, I think to truly address it, we have to diversify our approach to homelessness. And part of that diversification is collaboration with other service providers. We have 2 shelters in Northwest Arkansas. We have one down here in South Fayetteville, one in Bentonville, and I can tell you the numbers that Dr. Fitzpatrick is sharing are accurate because our shelter is full all the time here in South Fayetteville. I've provided, and I knew we should have probably passed these impact cards out back there, but there's some impact cards here that sort of talk about up front. When we finish, you can come and pick them up. But throughout Northwest Arkansas last year, we were able to provide over 24,000 nights of emergency shelter. And so as we look at this complicated problem of homelessness, let me sort of back up and talk about how we are diversifying our approach to addressing homelessness. When you look at homelessness, there are a ton of resources that are spent on individuals that are homeless, trying to get them out of homelessness. And what we have found is that we can actually spend less by focusing some of those resources on homeless prevention. And so both in, actually not just in Fayetteville, but in Springdale and the Rogers and Bentonville, the Salvation Army provides what we refer to as homeless prevention services that comes in the form of financial assistance. Rent, utilities, prescriptions. This last week I had an 84-year-old widowed woman that's living here in Fayetteville. She's on a fixed income, and she had contacted me because she was having trouble. She was fixing to be evicted from her apartment. So her fixed income came probably about 2 weeks into the month, and her rent was always due the first of the month. And she had it set up in such a way that she would pay her month's rent in advance. And this past year, this management company changed their procedures on how they take rent payments. And because of that, she missed one of those payments in February. And then March came along. So when she missed February, she balanced because she had been paying in advance. And then, so when March hit, now she doesn't get paid till like the middle of the month of March, right? March hits, all of a sudden she's getting these late fees until she finally gets an eviction notice. I called the management company and tried to work with them, and they were pretty strict. They were going to kick her out. She would have been homeless. And so that was homeless prevention service. We were able to pay her rent, and she didn't fall into that black hole of homelessness, if you will. So the homeless prevention services that we're able to provide, I think, are huge. The second approach to addressing homelessness is really what I refer to what our emergency shelters do. And our emergency shelters, they're sort of evolving into a hybrid model. As individuals come and stay with us, it becomes sort of semi-emergency, semi-transitional, because people tend to stay with us sometimes upwards to 3 months. And what the emergency shelters provide is some stability so that they can sort of rebuild their house, their lives, if you will. I think of the story where we're in a church, so I'm going to reference Jesus. Jesus tells a story about the man who built his house on sand. And he's a foolish builder, right? If you look at homelessness and someone who's experiencing homelessness, if we use the analogy that they're building a house, that their life, rebuilding their life is like rebuilding a house, it's sort of like they're building their house not just on sand, but like quicksand. It's almost impossible. And so those emergency shelters provide some stability for individuals. If you look at those impact cards, last year, 2017, we had 183 individuals who transitioned out of our shelter into permanent housing. Out of those numbers, here's what I love even more. In fact, talking to my housing manager last night, was how many of those individuals have come back to see us? We had one individual so far this year that's come back to see us, and he was homeless for a month, and he's back in permanent housing again. So the shelters provide some stability for individuals to begin to build new lives. When the temperature drops down to about 34 degrees, the wind chill 34 degrees, we open up what we call our cold weather shelter. We have a whole nother building that's sort of adjacent to where our shelter's at, and that allows us to increase our capacity And from November, December, January, and much of March, we have been opening up for cold weather almost every night just because of the temperature. And so that's where the emergency piece comes in, and then the transitional piece. The third approach that we see a lot of success in is addressing sort of one of the things that contribute to homelessness, and that is a substance abuse and addiction. We have a free 6-month residential rehab program available for men here in South Fayetteville. Last year, we had 17 graduates graduate, and a lot of the folks who come in and stay with us, they're not even aware of the program. And they come in and they realize, you know, I've got substance abuse issues I've never been able to address. And so as they realize there's that program, they come in to stay in our shelter, and then they move from our shelter into our rehab program, and 6 to 9 months later, they're living in their own home and they're productive citizens in society. If there was anything I could tell you about homelessness, is it's not what most people think it is. You know, the face of homelessness is not just the single man that it used to be. That's what homelessness was, but it's changed. There are families. So here in South Fayetteville, we have a capacity of 26 beds for homelessness. We have, and that makes up 12 for men, 8 for women, 6 for a family dorm. We have 20 beds that are allotted for the rehab program. In Bentonville, we have 46 beds. 26 are for men, 12 for women, and then we have individual apartments in our Bentonville shelter. Now, sort of looking forward what we hope to accomplish. We are currently in the works of raising money and looking to remodel our shelter to increase capacity. We want to move our rehab program out of our shelter and into that other building, and we want to create some modular type, what I refer to as modular type shelter, individual rooms where families who can come to us here in South Fayetteville can go into there, or even what we're starting to see more and more of are individuals who are within the LGBTQ community, where they don't feel comfortable within the regular population. And so we're looking for ways to sort of meet those gaps in services that we have. I would say probably there are 2 big challenges that we face as a community, and I'll wrap up with these 2 challenges. One is mental illness, and we've got to be able to address that if we're going to address homelessness. And then the second thing is affordable housing. If we don't address affordable housing as a community, we can't put people in homes. And so if we don't address that, then we're going to have to just settle for status quo. But I have a feeling that this community doesn't want to settle for status quo. So thank you for hosting. Thank you for this conversation.
Tell you, you're a good-looking group out there. I love all the diversity that I'm seeing and social workers that are out there. I have the honor in our district to support our social workers, and let me tell you, a heart of gold. So thank you for all of you out there who are social workers. In our district in Fayetteville, we have a little bit over 10,000 students. When we look at our population of our students that we serve approximately 40% of those who we would consider free and reduced, which means that they're experiencing life in poverty. When we look at our overall population, about 6% of our students are experiencing homelessness. And so in education, we look at homelessness, the definition of that, a little different than HUD. We look at, it's a McKinney-Vento Act, which was passed late in the 1980s. And so it was just to make sure that for families who are experiencing that transition in life, that we have equitable access to education. And so when we look at families when they're coming in, I would say probably about 80% of the students that we serve are what we would consider doubled up, meaning that because of an economic hardship of some sort, they are no longer able to live in their own housing. And so because of that, now they're living with friends or a family that may have room, or sometimes even a friend of a friend that may have an extra space. So for many of them, it is a supported environment, but we also know for others, it is not. It is just shelter, and it's serving a means. And so we have to always keep in mind just their situation and what those emotional and social needs are for them as we support them. Also, in looking at our district, we have great community supports. Been very proud and pleased of the partnerships that we have. Genesis what would we do without you? Y'all are fantastic. I tell you, our social workers are in communication with you on a weekly basis, sometimes daily. I love the fact that we have such great collaboration and can work on needs for families together. Those integrated supports mean and make all the difference for the families that we serve. We also have Emmanuel Lutheran Church and Potter's House, and I could mention several more that make such a huge impact for our families on a weekly basis. So for looking just also at those needs, we have our Outback Pantry. It sounds like the Outback Steakhouse, but let me clarify that Outback term came from the old Jefferson building. There was a building out back. And so that was where our social workers for the district and food and clothing was housed. And so in time, it has kind of been lovingly coined the Outback, even though we've had confusion when we say that at times. So we might have to revamp that name. But with that, we serve typically on average, since I've been working the last 3 years with this area within our district, we'll serve anywhere from about probably a max or more of about 1,800 individuals a year that come through needing access to food and also clothing. Of course, as you can imagine, keeping up with clothing needs is quite a task. And so that's where the partnership with Potter's House has been a saving grace for us. They give vouchers for our families, so we kind of have said that they can go and shop with dignity, and they have more choice where they can be able to find and meet those needs better for their family. And so very proud of that. Our social workers, we have 3 social workers within our district. You know, Fayetteville is very progressive and always has been. And I am very proud of that because having social workers in schools is not mandated by the state. It is an option and a choice that districts take on that extra funding responsibility of their own. And so I feel very proud that they see that that need is valued and they know that those supports are necessary as we engage children academically by the state. We're held accountable for that. But when we think about whole child, we know that we have to also make sure that they are safe, that they're secure before we can begin to engage them to be challenged. And so really it helps to make that full circle for us. One of our social workers serves as we kind of call her our FIT coordinator, which stands for Families in Transition. We don't like the term necessarily because it is used so much in education for homelessness, because with that definition, it can skew what that really looks like. We like families in transition because we feel like it is a hopeful term. We feel like it allows families to see that their situation is hopefully temporary, that it is transitional, and that hopefully we can walk alongside them and help them to navigate that journey and help them to be placed in housing through wonderful resources and partnerships that we have here, or through a variety of other resources that we have. We've also been very fortunate too that we are one of only 10 districts in the state who do receive a federal grant. And so with that money, we're able to provide extra necessities for families that other districts do not. We're able to provide extra food for them, clothing needs. We can go and buy things for them that they need to help them get on their feet. If they're moving into a new apartment, we can go and help with some of those basic needs to help get them set up, as well as in partnering with all of our community partnerships to allow that to happen. And so I feel very fortunate for that. So for families, lots of times, as you can imagine, if you are in a crisis and you've had to pick up quickly and move, you leave a lot behind. And so one thing with the McKinney-Vento Act is it allows us to immediately enroll a family, enroll students without the necessary information. So we know that, you know, they may not have any kind of identifying documents, birth certificate, immunization records. Sometimes it's very hard, they're coming from out of state, to be able to obtain that information. So with our grant money, we're also able to apply and pay for those fees to help get what is needed so they can go ahead and start school from the first day that they enroll, and that we can get moving quickly. You know, you have to work with a sense of urgency, and we do that for all students. But we also know that for those students who are in a crisis situation, I'm not for sure if you're familiar with ACEs, it's Adverse Childhood Experiences. If you haven't heard of that, that'd be great research for you to look into in your spare time. But we know that children growing up in trauma and in crisis, which we know homeless is a crisis situation, the adverse effects that can cause on brain development as well as emotional and social development. So we know that we have to move quickly to be able to meet their needs. Our numbers right now, if you'd like to know, as of today, we have 294 students within our district that we've qualified as fitting that McKinney-Vento requirement. When we look at that, we look at their nighttime residence. So we look at 3 different things. We look at nighttime residence. Is it fixed? Is it something that's not going to be subject to change? Is it regular, meaning is it consistent? And then also, is it adequate? Does it meet physical or psychological needs? So sometimes we might have a family who is living in a sheltered area, but it might be not what you would consider a shelter. It might not have running water. The windows may all be knocked out, no electricity, but for them it's a place for them to all be together and to be protected. And so that would definitely be something that would meet that criteria. We also have students who are considered unaccompanied youth, and so this means that these are students who there is no one who is legally responsible for them. Right now we have about 10 teenagers in our district that qualify under this status. And so for a lot of them, they are staying with friends. You've heard the term couch surfing. So they're kind of going from friend's house to friend's house to have a place to stay. Or maybe they've moved in with a boyfriend or girlfriend's parents temporarily until they're trying to figure out where they need to go next. At that age, it's not choice if they're considered an unaccompanied youth. It is because either parents have kicked them out of the home, and we do see that sometimes. They'll say, you know what, you're old enough that you can drive and you're old enough that you can work, and we're finished. And they will send them on their way. Sometimes it's because we have teenagers who are escaping abuse. And so that abusive environment, they are old enough that they can finally feel like they can have a plan in place to go and give them some supports. And so at that point, then we become that advocate for them with everything that they need.
Population has grown in Northwest Arkansas. So has all of our kind of confusion about what we should be doing, what's the best way to address this. And obviously you're all here tonight because you care about this too. So if you see someone in the community, we always wonder what's the best solution, what's the best way to help. So if all of you could tell us, just go down the line, kind of what would you have us do to get engaged, to make sure that we're part of this discussion, dialogue as a community? What would you have us do if we really wanted to take action, like tomorrow or next week or next month and even into next year? So sort of like what can we do now and what should we be looking to do long term, if all of you kind of want to give us advice. We're here because we care about it, right? Whatever order you want.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think just a couple of things that come to mind. And people ask all the time, what should we do or what can I do? And I think that my pat answer is to get engaged with the organizations that are boots on the ground and work with these folks every day. I just talked to a group a couple of weeks ago, and the overwhelming question was, well, can we do anything? And my response was, I think that the most important thing is to ask, is to engage in a conversation with the folks at Seven Hills or Salvation Army or Life Source or Havenwood or whatever organization that you might have a passion with in terms of the population that they serve, and just ask them, well, what can I do personally? Do you need volunteers? Of course, we know it's a no-brainer that they need money, but I think it's really important before you go too far to actually just ask and spend time in conversation with those folks who are working with this population every day.
Yeah, I always tell people the first thing they can do is smile and look at someone in the eye. Because people that experience homelessness often are separate from the rest of society pretty frequently. And so making sure you remember to respect people and look them in the eye and have a conversation, that's really, really important. That's one thing that'll happen naturally if you do get engaged. If you decide to walk in the doors at Life Source or Seven Hills or Salvation Army, and say, I want to help, tell me how I can volunteer, you'll end up meeting people not numbers of people that are homeless, but people that have names and tell jokes and you'll care about them. That's really crucial. Another thing is to remember you are welcome to volunteer at Seven Hills. In fact, we have some volunteers at Seven Hills sitting here tonight. There's a whole community of people thinking through how can our community respond to homelessness. And so there's a diversity of gifts that are needed, both in organizations or in entities like the Continuum of Care, which is an entity that helps kind of stage collaboration between all funders and service providers and of all types. So if you have particular gifts, maybe it's grant writing or maybe it's communication, and you want to add those gifts to be part of the solution, that's a great place to begin. And lastly, I would remind each individual that you belong to some social group. You belong to a church. So maybe ask yourself in your church, what can my church do? You're a citizen of a city. So talk to your city council people and your city leadership. Maybe you own a business or you work at a business. What's your part to play in the solution? So each one of us are individuals and belong to social groups that can be part of the solution.
There's really not a whole lot to add. I would say, obviously advocacy on behalf of those that need it. I think volunteerism, and not just volunteerism, is come in and work with food pantry or in the kitchen or in the shelter, but volunteer, get involved, sit on one of these organizations' boards, and be a part of the strategy and setting the strategy that these organizations are trying to come up with and to implement to address this growing problem. So.
I think it kind of goes back to what Jody said when we got started. It's amazing what you can do, right, when we don't worry about who gets the credit. And I think that we have to think about it as being a collaborative approach. When we look at Northwest Arkansas, we are resource rich, but systems poor. And there is no reason living in this community that we should have to worry about people having a place to stay at night. And so I feel like if we can continue to be educated, to collaborate with one another, we're all working for the same thing. So I think it's so important that we can, learn from each other, again, like I said earlier, we seek to understand the why, and that we help learn from each other and to help move forward so that we can keep that momentum going. That call to action is extremely important, and I feel like we are moving in such a great direction to begin to see some fantastic change. I would also say, the housing barrier that was mentioned earlier, we really need to be able to put our heads together and think about what does that need to look like. It affects people of all ages, fixed incomes, people who have a medical condition and now can't work anymore, and so they're trying to figure out next steps. And we need to be sure that it's a place that they can also live in dignity, that it's not just a place that's a dwelling that may not feel very safe or secure. I think all of those things are important for us to consider too. But I do believe when I look around this room and all the great minds that are in here, I believe the answer is in this room.
Hi, I'm Doris Davis, resident of Fayetteville for 12 years, moved here from Brooklyn, New York, so the homelessness we see here is a lot different than what you see in New York City. Two questions, really. One is, there's a brilliant book, you guys may have read it already, called Evicted: Poverty in the American City. And one of the things that I remember from this book, and I was part of Cory Booker's book club, was that homelessness is a trauma. It really is, right? These people are more likely to commit suicide, have substance abuse problems. So while I applaud all the efforts to mitigate and to prevent, we have to treat the whole person. Once they wind up in housing, how do we treat some of those ills and brokenness that came from being homeless, right? That's one. And that's something that I think we need to really help repair families. The second thing is, and I see the mayor here, and he just came back from the DC Mayor's Conference, and I know that on the docket, Mayor, was the homelessness issue, because affordable housing is a problem in places like Durham, North Carolina, and Charlotte, and and everywhere. So I'm wondering if there were any solutions there that might be shared with this crowd that we can say, we said the answer's in the room, it's always in the room, right? We just have to get the answers out and then do something about it. So just would call on your expertise there if you were able to share.
Thank you. Did any of y'all want to address that while the mayor's coming up to answer that question? Did you want to address her earlier comment about the trauma and?
Earlier when I mentioned the ACEs research from the Center of Disease Control, it's been a study that they started in the late 1990s, and actually those they interviewed, they have followed those adults all the way through now to look at mortality rates and what that does for health long term. And so I think that from the school perspective, what we glean about that is that we have to be trauma informed in our classrooms. We have to be trauma informed in our schools, because if parents are experiencing crisis and trauma, we know that children are too. And we know now from research that even a mom in crisis, because of the release of different hormones, is already affecting the development of the brain, the fetal brain, and what that looks like even from birth to age 5. And so we have to continue getting better at understanding how we meet the needs of these students socially, emotionally, but also engaging them to move them forward, because education is going to be a key for them long term. So as we look at that, we also then come to our community supports as how we support families, because when we have a child in trauma, we also have to look at how can we also meet the needs of the whole family. And that's where that benefit of those social workers and great community partnerships and resources can make a huge difference. But it is a wraparound, a true wraparound support that can't just be temporary. It has to be a journey that you tend to walk with the family on, to be sure. One thing that really stuck with me, Dr. Donna Beagle, she's out of Oregon, done some amazing research on poverty and grew up in generational poverty herself. But she made the point to me that I had not quite thought of in this way. In education, we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and looking at what those basic needs are to be met before we can get to that self-actualization piece. And so if we think about those basic needs, she said you cannot enable someone if their basic needs are not met. And I think we get hung up on a conversation a lot about we're enabling. If their basic needs aren't there and they're in crisis mode, we are not enabling that person. We are being human. We're taking care of those basic needs to get them to that point.
I think to add to that, I think a key component is the faith community. We're in a church. As people transition out of a homeless situation, for them to connect with community. And the faith community has a wonderful opportunity, I think, to come alongside and to walk with families and to sort of pastor, if you will, through some of this trauma that was mentioned.
I was appointed to after the first year. Some of the things that we're addressing on that community immigration reform and welfare reform, homelessness, workforce training. It's a pretty good group of folks. It's all across the United States. Some of the things that I thought was interesting, the veterans homelessness, which was sitting at around 50%. You all can kind of chime in here with the numbers. I may be a little off one way. Half of that was veterans. I mean, half of that was children, and a third of that was veterans. Is that about right? And the veterans homelessness has gone down almost in half, so that's down to about 15%. But what I thought was interesting was that the large cities on the California coast, it's increasing there. It said San Francisco had gone up 100%, which I was stunned at that. And then Los Angeles had gone up 15%. And all the cities, there's 5 or 6 that were, I think Portland had gone up. And there was these larger cities, they were really moving, a lot of the homeless folks were moving to the West Coast. And 2 things that they really point out to us, it needs to be the Housing First program. Housing first, and that's hooked up with continuing education. So we're going to be looking at that in the next few months. I go back in a couple of months and we'll go out another round. I wanted to also, I'm trying to remember everything that was said there. I didn't bring I wasn't planning on speaking tonight. So.
Sorry about that.
But the continuum of care was a real big federal program that is really on the front burner of everything. And I know they just had a meeting a couple of weeks ago. But the Housing First program is big. It says you got to put them in a house first, got to put a roof over their head. I know that Kevin and the city of Fayetteville, we've been with the University of Arkansas working on that. Seven Hills, I wanted to run just in case. Right now, the city of Fayetteville in the last 6 years now is putting over between $600,000 and $650,000 worth of homeless programs in this city. And right now, according to the numbers I got from Yolanda, we're contributing, I know, about $150,000 to Seven Hills to keep the doors open there. That place is vital. Got to keep the doors open. And then the last 2 years, we placed about, looks like 70 adults and 94 children. But it would seem, what's interesting for me, and I'm very passionate about making sure that everybody's taken care of. But it seems like we put more programs in place and we spend more money, but still my homeless rate seems to continue to grow, and I cannot really get my head wrapped around that, and that would probably be a question for you all. But the main thing we're going to try and take care of it. We're going to try and stop homelessness. I'm working on the no homelessness among veterans. We started on that federal program 2 years ago, and we've made some really big strides there. I don't have the exact numbers on that. I wish I did, but do you? 37. So we have done that for veterans, and because a lot of the veterans come back with PTSD, and it astounds me in this country that they would cut mental health programs. I'm astounded. And we need those. We need that for veterans and children. I mean, no child should go hungry. Every person should have a place to live. And one of the other things I'm working on is workforce training. Now, one of the things we're going to have to address around here right now, we've got less than 3% unemployment, yet my poverty rate is at 24% in this city. Something's wrong there. And what that thing is, they may be working, but they don't have a living wage job. And that is the thing. I mean, everybody's working, but you're not going to live on $10 an hour in this city, folks. That ain't going to happen for you. So we got to get the job training in place. We got to do housing first. And I don't have all the answers. I'm just doing the very best I know how to do as the mayor of this city. And we'll just keep on doing it until we turn this thing around. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Hi, I'm Mary Alice Serafini. I'm with the League of Women Voters. And my question is kind of logistical. I heard mental health addressed, but I didn't hear medical health. Some of us have volunteered at Welcome Health. Dr. Woods here has, I have. And we just wondered what kinds of challenges our homeless population faces, and are they connecting with medical health, medical care that they need? And along with that, the logistical piece is, how do they do transportation to many of these things that you've been talking about? What are the services available for them?
Just a couple of things, Mary Alice. Obviously, it is the one of maybe two or three of the largest problems that face the population, not only in terms of individual issues, be it hypertension, obesity, diabetes, and other chronic conditions, but access. And I think that it's not just Northwest Arkansas, but it's all over the country. We have a really difficult time in terms of thinking about that in how do we access medical services for a population that relies on public transportation in places where that public transportation is virtually absent. And I think that the response, and we already saw it happen once with the Walmart Foundation, and that was just to take it to them. And the dental health clinic that went online about 3 years ago is serving hundreds of patients doing comprehensive care where there was no dental care except for the small clinic that Welcome Health was doing. So that, I think that's one issue. In fact, we're talking with one of the healthcare providers in town right now to actually begin to develop a mobile health clinic that would actually begin to serve this population literally on site, not necessarily relying on the service providers, because sometimes the service provider might only be open until 4 o'clock, but there may be medical need at 9 o'clock at night, so that we're actually going to look at doing street outreach for this population in addition to shelter outreach. But yeah, I think it is the issue that is compounded by the accessibility problem in Northwest Arkansas.
And also too, if I can just speak to that, again, Fayetteville being progressive as they are, but they have a youth dental program that serves about 300 clients a year. And so with that, there is a partnership with NWA, and we have dentists that will volunteer for Friday clinics. We have dental assistant students that will assist. And then we also have, someone that we pay out of a Delta Dental Foundation grant. That grant helps to fund several different things for that clinic. It's housed over at our alternative high school. And within that, then it can also pay for us to have a driver. So on those days, we can go to the schools and pick students up, take them to their appointment, and then take them back, trying to make it as much as a time on task, so they're not missing as much as they need for school, but also taking care of those needs. And then we also have a wellness clinic that is housed out of the Owl Creek Elementary. It's something, of course, it'd be nice to have more of those, but we all have to look at funding and be mindful of that. But just to have that immediate access to medical and mental health for students on campus. So those are just some ways that we can support, and families can also access that wellness clinic as well.
My husband Jim and I live on South Mountain, which is south on South School Street. One of the problems that we experience that I haven't heard addressed tonight are the homeless camps. We just recently had a new camp that was formed on property on top of South Mountain. On March the 6th, one of those 3 days where we had a red alert fire warning, there was a fire set in the camp, and the wind was blowing out of the west, and it threatened our neighborhood. So we are so supportive of everything. We're so thankful for your services. We drive by Seven Hills 5 times a day, going back and forth to town, and of course the Salvation Army as well. So we are so supportive and have been for a long time, especially of Seven Hills from its inception. But we seem to have the problem of the camps in our neighborhoods. The Fayetteville Police Department have worked overtime helping us, and of course they're helpless. They cannot move a camp. So they can come and support us. They can stop illegal activities, but it's kind of up to us, property owners, to deal with the problem. And I'm wondering if any of you have any suggestions about what we're going to do with the camps. Thanks.
Well, I do. The problem that you talk about is not unlike, again, other communities across the country, and trying to find a solution that is both one that responds to the needs of neighbors and the larger community, while at the same time with the homeless population and what their needs are, is complicated. It is. And we know that there's a large concentration in a relatively small area in South Fayetteville, and it is our intention to change that. I mean, that is why we specifically looked at that piece of property where many of these camps are on, and said that, we have to change this. I mean, it was very interesting when we went through this process with the Regional Planning Commission, the City Planning Commission, that the people who complained at that meeting never really said anything about the project or the program that we were proposing. What they complained about was the trash and the crime and just the unsightliness of what was and what is a problem in that location. And so I think that the first goal is to clean that up. I mean, we have to do something about it. We have to change that. And I think that is part of what we want to try and accomplish by actually creating a community where there is housing and gives people an opportunity to change what it is that they're doing right now. I think that for many of them, they are experiencing homelessness because they have no other option. Now, I know that many of you believe that there are people who are living in South Fayetteville because they want to, but nobody wants to live in a tent where there is no bathroom, where there is no running water, where there is no dignity. Nobody wants that. Nobody desires that. So what we want to try and do is to somehow shift away from creating a laissez-faire, do what you want to do, and create a community where we give people a pathway into what we believe is a pathway out towards stable housing. You know, again, one of the things that oftentimes prevent people from actually getting into emergency shelter, transitional housing, whatever, is that they may have a pet. They may not be sober. And there's a whole laundry list of things that we could go over that are preventing them from entry into one of those. What we want to do is create a low barrier entry and a high barrier residence. You know, once we bring people in, we want them to recognize that there's a pathway out, but there's going to be some responsibility to get there. But I absolutely agree with you that, this is a University of Arkansas problem. As an employee of the university, I'm embarrassed by it. And I've had multiple conversations with the chancellor, and they want to do something about it. And I think that, with our work with the city and the mayor, we're on a pathway to do something about that. But I think that it needs immediate, and I totally understand your perspective.
I wanted to add, first of all, thank you for your support. And I'd be glad to be a bridge in between a homeowner and someone that is camping. And so if there is a problem, I'd be glad to try to step in the middle. I can't promise I can fix something, but either myself or someone on our team probably knows the individual that is camping in a place that's endangering public safety. And in conjunction with law enforcement, clearly we need to go through the right channels, but we'd be glad to try to help resolve that in a good way.
Thank you. Roll call.
Hello, my name's Erin. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here and learn about the things that are happening to address this issue. I really appreciate that and have learned a lot. I'd also want to address the people here and kind of share the reason why I'm here. I moved away from Fayetteville for a year and came back, and within that 1 year span noticed a really stark increase in the amount of homeless people or ambulant people asking for money on the corners. And so I was actually raised in a city where I became highly desensitized to that. And I live in South Fayetteville and encounter these people on a daily basis more than once. And I was really becoming annoyed with them and had conflicting feelings with that because I feel for them, but at the same time really didn't have the knowledge or the resources on how I might be able to help with them. And so that's why I'm here today, is because I wanted to learn about, different opportunities that there might be. And one thing that I had been thinking of was maybe a program of mentorship, working with adults or young adults, and really looking for opportunities to where we can work and enhance skills for these people, and also, you know, a friend, a support, someone who can, you know, in a way keep them accountable for the goals that they have to get themselves out of that situation. So if you could please talk to me about what exists already, if that does, or where we could start having that conversation if it doesn't. Yep.
Thank you.
I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah, I'll speak from our perspective. So at the Salvation Army, probably where we have a program that is designed to have a mentor walk through this, and this is not a paid staff, these are volunteers, is actually connected to our rehab program. Many of the individuals who have found recovery and have lived sober for many years are volunteering on a daily basis, working with these individuals. And so in some respect, that doesn't address all of it, but it definitely addresses at least a segment where we do have some mentorship taking place. And then I would say there are a lot of organizations, and with HARC, which is a group that is sort of coordinating care for a lot of the folks we're talking about. They have community liaisons that sort of walk them through this very complicated system to get them help. And so I think there are some of those resources, but I would say that they're probably lacking.
Aaron, you asked where, if we know of places where that this is being productive, and I can't remember if it's Amarillo or Lubbock, but Dr. Beagle, who I had mentioned earlier, she has a community approach just to poverty in general, but we know that that encompasses people who are homeless. And so with that, it's engaging the community. You a community workshop together with volunteers, and you have volunteers who are called navigators. And those navigators then are basically working with an individual for up to a year, if not longer, just walking side by side, helping with just basic things that a lot of us take for granted, but when you're living in crisis, knowing that those little things feel like huge steps to take and it's one more hoop to go through, but knowing that you're not alone when you're trying to figure out those rules of how all of these different things apply. And so it's just a form of extra support that can be there. And they're finding great success and even partnering with the university and doing some great things in that community.
Good evening. My name is Angela Denovi, and I serve as the Secretary of the League of Women Voters. And I have kind of a two-part question that I both personally experienced in one capacity or another. One of the things that you guys have not touched on tonight, but the university is represented here, I know just generally across the board, about 10% of college students are transient. They're living on friends' couches and things like that. So I'm just wondering if those got captured in your survey in any way whatsoever, and if any of you all are working on that. I'm sure there's students at the U of A who are experiencing that. And then also, you guys maybe briefly touched on families that are in transition coming out of domestic violence situations or abusive situations, and that one parent and those children at least temporarily lose their housing. And are you guys working on those type of situations as well? Thank you.
I know that, just as an inspirational story, I know there's a college student at U of A that used services at Seven Hills for many, many months, and took showers there and got food there. And about 6 months later, when we hadn't seen him for a while, he came back through and said that he got his feet under him, he got his own place, and he wanted to volunteer. And the food pantry on campus is called the Full Circle Food Pantry. And that's a story about someone coming full circle.
We do see families come to us who are experiencing domestic violence, and most of the time we try to actually take them to our Bentonville shelter, which has individualized apartments for families. It's more safe, but I think there's a shelter up in Bentonville, Peace at Home shelter, that also addresses that. And so, but as far as Fayetteville goes, having a specific shelter or a program that is just addressing that specifically, I'm not aware of.
Peace at Home is in Fayetteville. Yeah.
Yes. So we have, if we have families who have experienced that, we definitely would qualify students for McKinney-Vento, knowing that they've been displaced from home. And so we have a bus, unfortunately, that travels there on a regular basis to transport students back and forth from school. So I know that they can stay in the shelter for up to 90 days, and they do a great job of transitional housing. They provide so many different levels of emotional support and therapies, not only for adults, but also for children that can be after they leave the shelter. So they really do wrap around and support them, and are just an amazing service for many of our families.
Hello, first, my name is John Holland. I, myself, am just transitional out of being homeless, thanks to Seven Hills, the Salvation Army, and Genesis Church. These three helped me, my fiance, and my newborn child. Without these organizations, I probably would be staying in a tent somewhere with a newborn. My thing is, and this is probably mostly go to probably some other political people that would hear this over whatever y'all taping this over. The biggest problem that I've also seen as far as homelessness is lack of people who have, like my dumb ass got myself in trouble, excuse my language, where I would consider it was really an argument, but I pled guilty so I would get out, wound up with a felony. Now I can't get into a house. Now I can't get a job. Now, because I wanted to get out so bad, now I had to pay all this stuff to get out. And luckily, there was a landlord that looked at my record and went, oh, yeah, you got a felony, but this is not a criminal charge. You're not a criminal, you're not a drug dealer, you're not a child molester. But most people don't look at that. And also another problem is when you go to look for a job. You go to look for a job and you don't have a place, or some people will recognize you staying in a shelter. Or they will recognize that you're using Seven Hills address. And they will automatically put you down. These are things, I'm your neighbor. I'm probably living next to some of y'all. Don't I just move where I live at? You probably see me. I'm a worker. I've always worked my entire life. I did it. I got into an argument. They plead here as a felony. You plead out, and now you're barred from doing anything. For something that's not that serious, and they won't look at it. Now, you got those people that have done those, have spent their time, come home, and the same thing. And when you get told no enough times, you do give up. You do get tired. If you don't have a mental issue when you go, you have one when you stop. Thanks to especially these two gentlemen here in this church, has kept me sane. But there's people have been in this hole so long they don't know what else to do. We got a lot of resources here. There are people that help and people, but it's also, say, property managers, who won't give that person a chance. It is Lindsay Property is another one. You got so many Lindsay properties, but will not. As soon as they hear felon, no. But they'll take that deposit. They'll take the deposit fee that you fill it out. But as soon as you get, now what do you do when you keep doing that? When you don't run out of places to go? Private owners, same thing. They run a background check. They don't look no further than the word felony. Yeah, maybe, who knows? Maybe this person did get a felony, but he was defending his child.
John,
You don't check.
I'm sorry, if you don't mind me interrupting, I just wanted to say thank you for sharing, and I would just hope the panel could respond. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I just want to thank them for what they have done for me, because if not, I would, like I said, Genesis
Thank
Church,
you.
these two organizations here, I would be glad. Thank you.
And what a good reminder of what we talked about. The reason we're here tonight is addressing complicated needs. So thank you so much. And did y'all want to respond to Mr. Holland?
I was just going to say, John, thank you for sharing. And he highlighted a problem with Housing First, is that if there's not housing available, you can't do Housing First. So thank you for sharing, John.
Denise.
I'll make this quick, and I hope you can answer for several months until November anyway. I'm Denise Garner, and I am actually running for the legislature for District 84. And I realize that there are a lot of issues that the city's working on, that nonprofits are working on. Help me understand what it is that the legislature can do. I understand I already know, minimum wage is huge, a living wage is huge. We have landlord laws that are horrible, absolutely horrible. I know that we can work on some of those kinds of things. Tell me what else. John, thank you for sharing, and I hope that any of you that have ideas will let me know. Whether I'm there as a legislator or not, I will be there as an advocate. So let me know what we can do to help advocate through the state. Federal, I give up on federal right now. I don't know what to do about federal right now, but we have a great city leadership that's working on the city. What can we do in the state that would help make things easier?
Good question. Does anybody have any ideas on state policies? Certainly our landlord-tenant laws are the worst in the country.
That is worth highlighting. The landlord-tenant laws are the absolute worst in the country, and there's a great report out by, I think it's Arkansas Community Organizers, that is, I don't know if it's actually linked on the website yet, but I've read it, so I know it's out. And that is what puts certain duties on landlords. If you're going to rent a place, it's got to live up to certain habitability standards or something. And so we don't have that in Arkansas, and that is a problem. Another major one would just, I would highlight, Denise, is that housing affordability issue. I think the Joint Center for Housing at Harvard University has a map where they show county by county what percentage of renters are rent burdened. What percentage of renting households are paying too much for their rent and therefore leaving too little to cover the other expenses in life and vulnerable to a job loss or a health event. So that map shows that Washington counties is about 42% of our renters are paying way too much. That's 42% of our fellow citizens that are potential clients for services through homelessness prevention or bouncing back through basic needs services or housing programs. So addressing that housing affordability issue, I don't know a lot about it, but I have seen some states that have something called a housing trust fund that gets funded through sometimes a real estate transfer tax. And that fund helps incentivize affordable housing projects. So.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I certainly echo what Solomon said about affordable housing. I just recently read a report that, in fact, it just came out today from it's like the Low Income National Coalition federal agency that released this report. Go check this out because it's really, really very, very eye-opening. They said right now that of these challenged renters that Solomon referred to, there's about 11 million of those people right now in this country, and only about, I believe it was only about half of those actually have access to affordable or accessible rent. I also heard a statistic, not that we want to overdo the math, but I recently heard that in Northwest Arkansas that there are about 1,000 pieces of property that are in production. Either they're on the drawing board or they're being built or they're near completion Those 1,000 units have 5,000 people waiting to occupy. So we're at about 1 in 5 in Northwest Arkansas, and I think that, you know, again, it not only addresses the issue of affordability, but also for a large part of the population here, particularly those that are living at the poverty level, it's really about accessible housing.
Thank you. Do you want to?
Well, I would say I wish I would have had this question last week because I had invited you to a great meeting that we had with our Northwest Arkansas Continuum of Care and for 2 days, and had Dr. Pageant from NYU there to speak about her, you know, the Housing First research. So I think, obviously, if you'd love to join one of our meetings, I think that'd be a great conversation for us to have. And then also, oh, you were? I'm sorry, I did not see you. I was just so engaged, I didn't notice, I guess. And then also, too, it was hard. But then also, too, I think to create an opportunity for a task force committee to look at places that's going well. I don't think that we need to always have to start from scratch. I think we can look at places that are doing well, whether it's the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, Tulsa, Oklahoma. We have other places that have some good models in place that are making significant change. And so I think it's important for us to also learn from our neighbors.
And that's what I'm really asking is what are those models that are working that in your realm that we could model here?
An audience member suggested Austin, Texas would be good to look to.
Thank you so much for staying longer to learn more, and especially to our panel for sharing this very important information on a very complicated issue, and I hope all of us can definitely get more involved with the information we've been armed with.